Okay, I'd like to call the March 16th, 2022 Board of Selectmen's meeting to order at 6:30. Mr. Town Manager, do we have a need for a non-public?
We do under employment.
Okay. First item on the agenda for the board is that we have HB2 meals and room tax, and we all got a copy of a letter to be sent to representatives on the issue of this bill that the governor is asking to suspend the room and meals and room tax for the summer months. The town gets about $665,631 from the meals and room tax. The summer months are the most, when we get the most amount of business and get the most amount of taxes. And that will have an impact on the tax rate because that's revenue we take in and goes against the expenses. And more revenue we have, the less expenses we have, the lower the tax rate. So all those figures that we gave you for all those warrant articles, if this cut comes in, will not be right and they will not be high enough. So the board has asked the town manager to draft a letter, and I can read it. The Wolfeboro Board of Selectmen have been made aware that Governor Sununu is suggesting the meals and rooms tax be suspended for this upcoming summer. The town of Wolfeboro has programmed $465,631 in anticipated revenue from the meals and room tax distribution. This equalizes 19 cents per thousand of assessed evaluation. Any reduction in this anticipated revenue, especially during the peak of the summer tours, would certainly have a negative impact on the Wolfeboro taxpayer. It is our understanding that both the House and the Senate have a rule in place to not allow introductions of late bills. The Wolfeboro Board of Selectmen are asking that you stand behind the rule of not accepting a late bill. Should the House and Senate decide to accept a late bill which proposes the suspension of the meals and rooms tax for any period of time not be supported by you? Thank you for your time and consideration in this very important matter, which we believe will have a negative impact on our taxpayers. Board members?
I'm hoping that we can address this with Jeb Bradley, Representative DeShays, and Representative McDonald next week. We should add it in and talk to them about it. I have heard through people that New Hampshire, like a lot of states, are having bumper revenues. There are a lot of states in the country that their coffers are full. And there is a potential, I've heard, that if the governor institutes this suspension to help the tourism industry, that there's monies that will be going to towns to supplement for the loss to the individual towns. This is just a rumor. I think it's something that we should address with our representatives and our state senator.
Board members, I would like to suggest that we send this, just like we emailed the other
to
them,
this.
And that I have absolutely no problem adding it, and I think that's a good idea, to our discussion. But this is what we have in front of us. This is what the governor says, and I think it's important for the selectmen to make a stand on it. So is everybody in agreement we send this? Can I have a motion that we do?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All righty, and we'll add it to that agenda. All righty, we're going to leave our regular session. We're going to start a work session, and bring your chairs on up, and we'll get to talking about bike trails.
Madam Chair, I'm going to step down from this. One of my companies rented a lot of the equipment that was used to build these trails, and therefore there's the perception of conflict of interest. So I'm going to step down from this
Thank you, and you're going to still join us in the audience. Thank you, Luke. Come on up.
Just come right up and you
Come
can
on
spin
up.
the microphone.
Hang on. I can-
Yeah. Someone can grab that mic.
Do you have the thumb drive? I can put it in here if it's okay, or you can.
Spin that one right around if you want.
You know what, huh?
6 feet.
You want to
We're
use,
going to need to put microphones 'cause
Yeah.
it's on the
Grab that right
television, so
there.
we're gonna need to make sure
get the
I want to hear
voice.
your wonderful voice.
Okay, can you hear me now? So what we've done is Chris has actually put together a presentation that basically addresses your agenda with all the trails and what you're asking for, and then a little more to help answer, hopefully, 95% of the questions, concerns, and to help push things forward. So as soon as,
sounds like a good plan for us.
yeah.
Can you see that? Yes. Okay.
And I know that the printouts, the material you received, some of the printouts, the copies are not very good.
I think what will be nice, because we can then ask you a question about a trail that we
You
see,
can.
that
And
makes
then,
this a little bit easier.
I think we can share the presentation with you when we're done, so you
Okay.
have it, so you can refer to it.
Good.
Look at the nice, clear photos instead of this stuff.
Well, we're used to this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he'll broadcast it out across. Okay. Just cue me through and I'll advance it.
If you could make that go, you could hold it and walk wherever you want. Just pull it off.
Okay, now this is fine. Okay, great. So as we all know, there's been some conversation around the trails. What trails exist? Where are they? Who built them? What's going on? So what we did was put together a presentation. Some of this reiterates what Andrew Ingram shared about a month or two ago, a previous presentation that I put together that I wasn't able to be part of, but I left a few of the slides in at the beginning just to set the kind of precedence of who is Wolfeboro Single Track Alliance, what are we trying to achieve, and then we have details around the trails and what's being built. So if we go to the next slide. You can kind of just see the agenda, right? The one thing I put in italics here, this is not the master plan. We did have, or you saw a version of a master plan that we had funded that was not necessarily what we had anticipated when we paid for it, so we are probably going to be re-engaging with another group to fund a master plan and would like to work with the town in conjunction to get that to be finished. That said, this does have a lot of overview of what we're doing and what we're trying to get done, so just don't want to set any expectations that this is the actual master plan. So if we go to the next slide, again, I mean, I think the basic statement here, right, is we're here to build trails. I don't want to belabor the point, so we can go to the next slide. And again, right, the mission statement that exists on our website and in general is that we're a group of passionate bikers of all ages that bring different talents to the board, and that's really kind of what our goal is to do, is use all of our talents and specialties to bring that to hopefully build trails in this town. You can go to the next slide. And that's who we are. You guys can see this after, so I won't go through everybody. So one of the things here, we saw this slide before, and I think that it's really important to show that we have been working over the past few years in establishing relationships. I know that this has been brought up in some of the conversations previously around kind of who are we working with and what are these organizations, and I know that people have dug into the pathways and the different groups that we've worked with. I think the one thing that's most notable here is the Conservation Commission. We are at the final stage of getting an MOU signed there, so that would be for all of the work within Fernald and Trask. And I know that that's less of a conversation point, but just wanted to share that's an update since the last time this slide was shown. We can go to the next slide. So the existing bike trails, I think at a high level, we have different areas within the town. The closest to town is the Sewell Woods, which I know everybody's familiar with the Nordic ski trails. Abenaki, which is over at the ski area, which again shares Nordic ski trails as part of the network. Fernald, which is over near the old Fernald train station off of the rail trail. This is an area, again, and we'll talk through each of the different sections as far as their details. But that's probably one of the newer areas to be developed. And then Trask is farther out in North Wolfeboro, and that's probably the least developed of all of the trail networks that we've been working on so far in town. You can go to the next slide. Oop. Okay, cool. So we'll start with Sewell Woods. You can go to the next one, please. So Sewell Woods, so this is 3.9 miles of single track. I know in previous conversations, Rudy had shared kind of the how we've worked there with the Lakes Region Conservation Trust and established a relationship there. I think that this is a nice blend. So if we start talking about what trails exist for which types of riders and what types of groups, Sewell Woods is going to be the most friendly for a lot of different types of folks. There's stone dust trails where somebody in a wheelchair could roll themselves around. There's, and I've seen friends out there with their kids with training wheels on their bikes. It's not anything technical. And that's why I wanted to call out the 3.9 miles of single track, because this is stuff that kind of deviates into the woods. And if you look at this map, those are the dotted lines. And as you can see, the solid lines, there's a lot more of those, and those tie to the existing cross-country trails. So this area here is kind of that nice blend. It's close to town. It's very accessible for all ages, for all types of people, whether it's walking. If you go out in Sewell Woods at any point, you see people with their dogs, you see people with their kids, you see, all kinds of people out there. And then also the one thing to note with Sewell Woods is that this is closed in the winter for biking, and you can snowshoe and you can cross-country ski. So as far as multi-use, multi-season, there's a clear delineation between what can be done in the different seasons just based on what the Nordic skier has been doing for years there and kind of maintaining that cross-country trail network.
What would be helpful for me?
Sure.
Would be on the map if, and I know this is probably very difficult for you, but I see easy double track, easy single track, more difficult double track, more difficult single track, and it's a little bit hard to just differentiate between the dotted lines.
I think that's the point. If you were to see the actual color photo, it's very clear.
But
The one thing,
because the trails and I don't, it would be nice to know that there are 4 miles of easy double track, 3 miles of easy single track, 2 miles of more difficult. So we would get an idea for this area, how much it caters towards easier, younger riders, older people, things like that, and how much it caters towards more hardcore mountain bikers.
I'm talking about as far as the single track trails themselves, they are all, the blues and the greens are actually really Peter. I think if you ask anybody, they're all green, blue. The way you ride in there, it's hard to do. It's harder to do a single section and say, oh, this is a green trail. I'm going to ride this. I'm going to then jump on the double track and go over here and do that.
the one thing I do want to say, just in general about the
Can you
maps.
explain the difference between the single track and the double track? There may be.
Absolutely.
I have no idea. As we go through here, let's
Right.
kind of.
Yeah, and there's two things that aren't necessarily called out specifically in this presentation, but in conversation, like in the last board meeting that we had, and lots of email between us, one of the things that I really called out in the last meeting was we need to unify all of the bike trails, because Peter Goodwin has done some of this. I've created the stuff around Abenaki because nothing existed. and making sure that, like you're asking for, the delineation between easy, medium, difficult, blue, green, black, dotted versus solid. There's discrepancies even between the stuff Peter Goodwin's provided. If you look at Fernald, we'll see it says more difficult single track, but that's actually easy single track, but he's saying it's more difficult based off of the rail trail. So I think contextually, if we look at the whole system, we need to unify the type of map styling and the key of what exists and how we kind of
Yeah, Jim can
classify.
speak. Jim can speak on this. Jim skis out there a lot. I ski out, but not nearly as much as he does. And they have difficult, more difficult, most difficult slopes for cross-country skiing.
Yep.
And how similar are they, Jim, at Abenaki compared to Sewell Woods? Would you consider a more difficult one at Abenaki the same as at Sewell Woods, or are they just completely different?
You're going to have to use the mic.
Yeah,
I'm
we're gonna
sorry.
have to just take it off the table and pass it back and forth.
I think because Sewell Woods gets used more, that, as Rudy and Chris alluded to, you can see that the green represents the beginner or easy trails, the blue is intermediate. So most of the people that go into Sewell are familiar with that, especially if they've looked at this before. Just to back up real quickly, the enhanced trail section, which is stone dust, which was the trail that was improved by the Pathways Committee, raising that back so many years ago, is approximately 3 miles. And then there's roughly a mile of enhanced trail over at Abenaki, which comes out of the Abenaki.
All the trails,
Right.
makes all the sense in the world.
And it is a standard. It's
Okay.
like any ski area you go to. You
Yep.
look at a blue, and you
Yep.
know it's a blue, but I
Yep.
tell you, a blue at Cranmore is not the same as a blue at Cannon.
But this is all Wolfeboro. So we
No,
get-
but I'm just saying, it's a standard,
Yeah,
wherever you go across the country, the world,
yeah.
standard stuff. And the map that you see here, I just want to make it clear also that this is the map we created. This will never be the official map for Sewell Woods. LRCT is creating their own map in their own format with their own style and everything they do, because that's what they do across all of their properties.
Right, and that was one of the reasons we were trying to talk about unification and knowing that certain areas have certain standards for their maps, and if you look at the different stuff, even though it may be created by the same person, they're different. So knowing we wanted to show maps and me having to create the Abenaki one over the past 2 weeks, I now realize all of the discrepancies and the things that, even in looking at the other systems maps, that we should probably address. And the good thing, like we said earlier, is the fact that we do have a very good relationship with the Conservation Trust. So as they're creating their new maps, I think if we look at our maps, we could probably try to tie that same look and feel, because I think if a person arrives in Wolfeboro to ride their bike, they should know, if they're looking at the map, I can bring my family over to Fernald, or I can go to Abenaki with my teenager, or I can go to Sewell Woods with my 3-year-old or whatever. I think there's a lot of trails that we could, depending on what type of parent you are, you could probably bring them to everywhere, like I would. But I think it's, for out-of-towners, at first, I've lived here forever. I haven't really ridden much at Abenaki because Fernald's near my house. So that was one of the things that internally, as we talked as a board, signage, which I know is another thing that we have budget for any new trail building, is making sure it's clearly marked. Because if you're not familiar with the area, it's, if you don't have a kiosk saying you are here periodically, and if you don't have a trail marker, sometimes you get turned around. So I think that's something that's not an issue and is clearly on the kind of the docket for this year, as the Single Track Alliance. So
That's a great idea, to use the Lakes Region Conservation Trust maps almost as a template.
yeah, whoever has a better one, I'm fine with using, as long as I'm not the one making it.
And so my understanding is you have an MOU with the Lakes Region Conservation Trust.
I believe, yes.
Yes, you do. And do you have any future development you think you may do in there, or is that kind of complete?
I think it'll be a constant improvement. Again, those trails were hand-built. A lot of them are
Okay,
rough, roomy. And we also, there are plans in the works to, a lot of the snowshoe trails, which these trails were based upon, go through really wet areas.
okay,
So when we originally did this, there's 2 sections that we could not do on the bike, so we kind of went around, which we would like to put in what we'll call it a boardwalk that would go across these areas. And hopefully one of those will go in this summer. It'd be great to see both of them. So we're working with LRCT on the plans, just going through that process.
but you're looking for improvements to existing trails. You don't have any future development of any trails?
Nothing large, you
Okay.
know, maybe just trying to connect other areas to keep, because one of the main things we'd like to do is to keep the bikes off the double track wide trail because that's where all the walkers are for the
Okay.
most part. Even though we did have a trail camera out there this past summer to try to monitor a few things, and I was actually shocked at how many walkers are on these what we call single track trails. And
Okay,
even runners, because I've just heard they just enjoy them a lot more than big fat trails.
okay.
Well, we've walked them with the dogs all the time because we walk them with snowshoes.
Yeah,
So-
but I mean this is in the summertime.
Yeah, so because we always walk them with snowshoes in the winter, we walked them in the summer before you even built the trails with the dogs because we knew where they were.
Yep.
So that does create now a little conundrum because we don't walk them as often because you can have a bike come flying up behind you and then there isn't a lot of place to get out of the way quick with your dog and you don't want the biker falling down. So,
Brad, do you have any questions?
Well, the only one right now is maybe to the question you'd asked a few minutes ago, the difference between the single track and the
Oh.
double track. And I have an idea in my head what they are, but
right.
I might be way off on that.
So I can, what we consider double track would be any like a class 6 road, any of the snowmobile corridors, anywhere you could literally wide enough to drive a vehicle through. That's a double track trail. And that's like really every single this cross-country network, every single one of those here and at Abenaki, we would call double track. You know, there's double track trails out behind my house up on the other side of town that go, because there was no snowmobile corridor, fire road, class 6 roads. All that what we call double track. Where single track would be more as a hiking trail that you would go if you would hike anywhere in the White Mountains or anywhere. So it's as wide as this table at the most, 4 feet. Normally, the actual trail itself is 18 to 24 inches wide, and then the corridor is just enough for shoulder. You should be able to walk. The rule is you should be able to walk somewhere like here and not hit a branch or a tree. Kind of things.
Yeah, and that's something that in the master plan, there is clear guidelines around the type of trail, the width, the clearance for walking, equestrian, biking. Again, that's not in here because this is not the master plan, but when that is produced, there'll be like very clear guidelines, like what do these types of trails encompass? How should they be built? What are the widths? How to,
And there are a lot of standards put out by like the U.S. Forest Service.
Yeah.
Lynn, do you have any questions? Luke?
Okay. So you want to move on to the next section? Okay, great. Yeah, we probably have a intermediate slide. All right, Fernald. So as I was saying about Fernald, so this is another area, and again, you can kind of see the discrepancy here in the key and the more difficult single-track bike trail. Although made by the same map maker, it has a little bit of a different classification, and again, we're fully aware that we want to unify that. Fernald does have about 3.5 miles of trails. There's a little bit more to be completed this summer as far as getting, if you look at what we call the west side, which is closer to Route 109A and Fernald Station. There was work that had to stop last fall because it became winter. And we were also waiting for some telephone posts or poles to be able to lay down, because there is a wet section, so to cover across that needed to be puncheon bridges to do that in a way that was kosher with the wetlands. So that's one area that needs to be completed there, and I believe, Dan, there may be the parking, is that going to be on the docket for this year?
Just take it to your chair.
Yeah, the Conservation Commission has approved spending money to build a parking lot about where the words Fernald Station are on that map.
Okay.
We're working through getting a driveway permit to try and enter at that location at this point, and then the trail would connect to the right of the words Fernald Station to where kind of the trail ends up there. So that's the plan. There's a large wetland complex in there to be crossed, about 200 feet wide.
Yeah.
So between the parking lot and the 200 feet of trail, it's not showing up on that map. So that's part of what's to be completed.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming, because I did go over all the Conservation Commission, and you usually have a contract with the builder.
Yep.
That deals with the scope, the cost, the liability insurance, and everything.
Right.
And that will be the same for this section.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's, because that's Conservation Commission, we're obviously kind of part of what's going on, but the actual build and planning for a lot of that is handled by the Conservation Commission.
Yeah,
So-
and we totally understand that, and they have done it with a very, at least what I saw, they had contracts, they had votes, I didn't have any issue with what went
Yep.
through there.
Yeah.
I don't know about anybody else.
Yeah, and in this section here, I think just to kind of finish the story of Fernald, right, is the fact that it is mostly single, what we would classify as the single track. So this is
100%.
Yeah, so this is an area where, I mean, honestly, anybody can ride for the most part. If you can ride a bike and you're not terrible, you can go to Fernald. And it's great because it ties to the rail trail, which again is accessible from town or from where I live up on Cotton Mountain. I can ride all the way down, do some riding there, and ride home. So this is a year-round spot. So we spend a lot of time, or I should say Rudy, spends a ton of time grooming out there in the winter for fat biking. And it's open for walking and snowshoeing and cross-country skiing. And I think the one thing that, although we are very open to whoever, we do not like it when people walk when there's fresh snow and put big footprints in the freshly groomed stuff, but it happens. We suggest people snowshoe in the winter if we just groomed it, but the trails are meant for everybody. And that was something that the Conservation Commission made clear is if we're doing anything in these trails or, how to set the expectation about them, they're open for the public to use and enjoy. So, and they're beautiful. They go right along the side of the river. And I think if you go to the next slide,
Chris.
Yeah.
Just real quickly, I want to back up just a second, that previous slide.
Sure.
This area at Fernald Station is becoming very quickly very crowded,
Okay?
both all seasons of the year. On the Cotton Valley Trail Committee, it's gotten our attention in terms of being plowed, the lot being plowed in the winter to allow access not only for the fat tire bikes,
And by the
but
way, and that's actually being maintained by
Well, that's what I was going, when you say they were groomed.
Sorry,
that's-
Wolfeboro single track.
Yeah, but, so Wolfeboro Single Track is maintaining the grooming of those trails
Well,
in the
we groom
winter?
the trails for the fat biking, but we also have a guy who is plowing the parking lot
Yeah.
because the town cannot handle. they
Yeah,
have too-
the
they
town.
won't-
Yeah, the
Right,
town.
I mean, this is an expansion on,
So it's been asked and it was denied.
okay.
Yeah.
And that will be an issue we're all going to deal with,
Yeah.
because what we're going to deal with is
Well,
maintenance, whose responsibility is what, and that seems at this point, that's all still part of the Conservation Commission. If they're going to build the parking lot,
Yeah, the intention is to build a new parking lot because of the heavy use that the existing parking lot's getting, and sometimes it's not big enough for all the vehicles that
yeah.
wish to be there, especially when the putt-putt folks are in town, so.
And so that would be on the Conservation Commission, their trails, their property, their, you know,
Yep.
and that's, you're planning to take care of the maintenance and all that also, Conservation Commission?
Yep.
Right,
Yeah.
and Wolfeboro single track, along with other, I mean, we have work days out there.
Okay.
For maintenance days, like spring cleanup, you know, we blow the leaves in the fall, we groom it in the winter. So as part of WSA, that's part of our thing, is to help someone like the Conservation Commission to keep these trails, you know, maintained.
Okay.
So a question for me. I see tan on my, not on yours, but on mine, I see tan, red, and then black lines, but you would consider all these less difficult intermediate trails?
Yeah, more green,
Yeah.
a little,
And if you're looking further, is that further down the presentation, the tan lines?
No, it's just the way that our map came out that you sent us is much different than that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we got an updated one. I'm sorry.
Those colors date back to a Boy Scout Eagle project,
Okay.
when the young man that was doing that built a kiosk, and he also color-coded the trails the way that hikers do, so that different trails are designated by different colors.
Okay, so one
So-
color isn't easier or more difficult.
No,
They're just
no.
different colors so that you know what color you're on.
Exactly.
correct.
Yeah, right.
Color,
And the kind of one notification difference, just to kind of get a little more into it, is so the Sewell Woods trails were completely hand-built, meaning there was no machines. It was people with shovels and rakes and backpack blowers. Fernald was completely machine-built. So it's the same width, but if you go in, like, once the snow is all gone, and if you were to walk through Sewell, and just take note of what you're looking at, and then you were to walk through Fernald and take note at how it's built, you'll see a difference. You know, over here, they had an excavator that would go through, remove the duff, scrape up a lot of the roots, come along. They had, you know, kids going along with ploppers and cutting all the roots out, and then filling stuff back in. So it's a much smoother trail than Sewell Woods.
Yeah.
And that's our goal at Sewell Woods, is we're in the process of trying to what's called capping trails to make them smoother. And then also there's a some fundraising that was done end of last year to help cap some of the trails in Fernald, because what happens is, you know, they've gotten ridden so much, a rock that used to stick out a half an inch is now 2 inches tall.
Who,
So that is part of the,
who is the environmental watchdog for all these trails?
I guess it would be the Conservation Commission.
Okay.
Oh, well, certainly with regards to Fernald, I mean,
Right.
they manage the property, so they're responsible for,
So when we go to make trails through the woods, do we do wetland mapping and check for, you know, for special species, anything? Do we check all that?
when the trails were in the planning stage, yes, I walked the trails with Andrew Lester that built those trails and made sure that the sensitive areas were avoided.
and you laid them out.
I laid them, yeah, I
Yeah,
helped
so
with the
he knew
layout of the
exactly.
trails. And with the large wetland complex that's close to Fernald Station, I flagged both edges of that wetland so that there'd be no confusion in the future as to where it stands.
Does the Conservation Commission have as-built of these trails?
No. I'm sure it's something we can develop, but we don't have them as of yet.
One of the things, and don't want to tell the Conservation Commission what to do, but we have found it's better to get it all down on paper, because then everybody sees and knows the same thing. Some of the things in the past that weren't done, we find all sorts of interesting things.
Yep.
We find out stuff 30 years later and we're like, how was that done?
But anybody else have any questions on Brad? Okay.
Yeah, and I think, you know, one thing I just want to show here, right? This is Fernald. This is what you see when you go out there. I had a lot of pictures because that's where I go a lot. You know, my son, when he's 3, is going across one of those bridges. You know, some people get intimidated looking at features that are built, but a 3-year-old can ride it. You know, I bring my whole family. My daughter was 3 and my son was 6 this summer, and we were riding as a family, everybody on their own bikes. The person on the left is a teenager that's from Massachusetts that was coming up every weekend with her father to ride these trails, and she got very big into mountain biking, was so happy that this stuff was being built out there. And, you know, seeing that, somebody that's just coming out of their shell to come do this on these trails, it's awesome. The picture in the bottom in the middle is a night ride. You know, in the middle of winter in Wolfeboro at 5 o'clock when it's pitch dark, you can strap on some headlights and ride as a group. I think there was like 10 of us that night going out and riding around. So, and then the other one is the snow dog, which is the groomer that Rudy wrestles through the woods over there a lot of times. You know, and a lot of these things, you know, like the snow dog, that was a bunch of us that had an idea at a board meeting. We bought it. And then people just donated their time to go ride the thing around, and it's tricky. But people from all over town, you know, a friend of mine who lives in Portsmouth, who's a sales guy on the road, he'll stop in, hit Fernald on his fat bike on his way to Conway and things like that. So there's people that are coming from all over just to ride trails like this.
Has this area gotten really crowded? I heard you're going to be in the parking space. Volume.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, and I know that the parking is, I mean, parking's always tough. No matter where you are in the summer, if you try to find a spot downtown, you're not going to find a spot. In the winter, like Rudy was mentioning, you know, we do plow the Fernald Station area, but there's people that are walking their dogs, there's people that are cross-country skiing, there's people that are snowmobiling, there's people that are
The rail
riding.
trail has a ton of access.
Yeah, it's just another spot for the rail trail, so not necessarily everybody's going into Fernald.
Yep.
But it just, when you have the biking starting there, I mean, some of us, when we do the night rides, we'll park at Albee Beach and then ride up from there just to make the ride a little longer. But some people don't want to ride that extra mile or two on the rail trail, they just want to go straight in, so.
It's an incredibly popular place with dog walkers because it's one of the few places they can go with their dog on a leash.
Yeah.
That's a thing I always ask them, like, why are you here? And they're like, this is the only place I can walk my dog off.
Yeah.
So in there on all those trails, you're having bikers and walkers.
All summer long,
All
absolutely.
summer
And
long,
runners.
that's
A lot of people love to run it.
There's no, people seem to be able to work out.
Oh, easy, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
There's never been an issue.
Okay. I mean, it seems like that on the rail trail. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Nobody's ever going that fast.
I mean, and honestly, to my point earlier about these trails, like kind of being able to be ridden by most people, they're not extremely steep. There's not turns where you're coming around where you can't see anybody. For the most part, there may be one or two, but you know, people aren't going 100 miles an hour through the woods there. So, you know, I don't think that's an issue. And I think, as we'll find later when we're talking about single direction or multi-direction trails, that's where you want to start making some clear lines around, watch out. So,
And I think we need to keep in mind also that there are probably 3 to 6 people maybe riding or walking on the trails at any one time, but all day long. So that gets absorbed over 4 miles of trails pretty easily. It's not like, you will cross people, but it's not like there's traffic jams out there.
Anybody else? Any? All right.
okay, great. Trask Mountain. So this is, again, like I said, the least developed area as far as ridership or maintenance. You know, this is stuff that was the Conservation Commission had put in, and I believe this was mentioned in the last presentation, maybe I think 2 years ago, Dan. So there's trails there. We would like to expand and do some stuff there, but it's, I'd say, less of a focus compared to all of the different areas that we've been working on, but it does exist. People do maintenance out there, because I know there were some trees down towards the end of the summer, and some folks went out and cleaned it up. So it's being maintained, but I would say it's not, just because it's, again, it's a little bit further out of town and not as well connected to the network. So I just think by that nature, it gets a little less use.
Conservation.
Yes, that was constructed pre-pandemic by the Student Conservation Association, contracted with them to construct the trails.
And I think one thing to note, that is actually a really great area as far as the grade and the ability to create. Like if we wanted to do more trails there, it's a great area. So it's just, again, nice for the types of diverse riding. That's going to be a little steeper. It's going to be more, you'd say, blue trails, where people that don't want to pedal a lot, they're not going to want to go there because you have to pedal to come back down. And I think that kind of takes some of the worry out of the people on the trails when it has that type of riding. So, but again, the diversity to think about, we've talked about Sewell Woods and we've talked about Fernald as being very friendly to pretty much everybody. Trask, you kind of then maybe skew a little bit towards an intermediate rider. So,
I got to go off topic. I'm sorry, I have to ask. They want to put a Frisbee golf course in town. Would Whiteface or Trask Mountain work better for them?
I don't know if the conservation easement that's on it would allow for that or not. I do know that the Conservation Commission has been approached by the Frisbee golf people regarding putting a setup at Trask.
Okay.
But it has not been reviewed by the full commission, so.
They came to us and we sent them over.
Yeah. And that just triggered my mind because you said that Trask is too far out, not connected. I'm like, that's probably where they should go for the golf because that's a destination then for them.
yeah.
If I could on this one, I do have a little bit of a concern based on some history, and I think Dan probably remembers this. The access to this, correct me if I'm wrong, is off of a Class 6 road, correct?
Yeah.
And we've got some road problems there, and I believe there's a resident that lives on that road, and that resident had some concerns relative to the traffic, specifically during mud season, and the maintenance of that Class 6 road. So we should probably just touch on that item.
Yeah. Subsequent to that, he bought a mountain bike. He loves it. And now he's much happier than he was.
Understood.
Yeah.
But that may be something we're going to have to keep an eye on if we extend it. I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Brad, anything?
That's the only thing I was going to ask eventually was on that old Route 28, that's Class 6.
Yeah. And as we transition to the next slide, the call out on Whiteface, I did not put Whiteface in here because that's hiking only, and that's a Conservation Commission property, so not relative to bike trails. We don't maintain it, we don't ride on it, so I just left it out.
Okay.
Okay, so Abenaki, the moment you've all been waiting for.
Just been waiting for this one.
All right, so the map here, what we're seeing is the cross-country ski trails that have existed for as long as I can remember. I don't know their history beyond that, so don't ask me questions. What we mapped out, or what I mapped out here, was I wanted to make sure we could see a few things very clearly. One is the green, although counterintuitive because it's a white background, is the trails for skiing. The blue is the retention pond for the water treatment facility. Any of the kind of orangey or whatever it looks like on your printout is going to be roads. And the color coding on those trails, I believe, is what was on the maps that I found on the Cross Country Ski Trails website.
Yeah, they're all blue except for Holy Shoe, which is black.
Yeah. So if we go to the next slide, it gets a little more busy. So this is, as of March 2022, a snapshot of what's happening over there. This map is slightly different than the one that you guys have because I was able to connect with the trail builder on the climb line about the actual proposed trail there. But this is really showing what exists for bike trails in conjunction with those cross-country trails. There's one thing that I do not have outlined here, which is some snowshoe trails that have existed there forever, which kind of coincide a little bit with the climb line that we'll see. But ultimately, this is really the big picture, and I tried to put some different things around where the lodge was, where the rink is, what's a new trail, what's an old trail, and tried to make as much sense as possible. In this one, I did color code the climb line as green because it is beginner. And again, to the point of the trails and whatever the convention is for labeling these, we'll get there. But I just wanted to delineate the trails to be completed with red because I think that's part of, the main part of where this conversation started. And then proposal of new trails, which is things that we would like to do should we be able to continue and finish the existing work that started last fall. So if you go to the next slide, this is, I think, where the conversation started, right? And I'm not going to rehash all of the stuff that's been shared in previous meetings around who did what and what permission existed or didn't exist. But did want to try to show visually where these trails are, where they stop, where the intention is for ending them, and I even added how much has been spent here, just because I think as far as the understanding for the town of the type of money that the organization was able to raise to put in these trails, it's significant. And I think it's a great asset for the community to be able to get trails like this. They are truly world-class. They're being built by people that build trails in the greatest areas of this country to the best standards possible. So I think that's just one thing to make sure is clear, is that these aren't, like Rudy was saying, it's not somebody with a rake going out in the woods and a leaf blower. This is legitimate trail construction with the latest practices using drainage and culverts and putting down mats to contain erosion. It's things that are done in the right way. So,
Now, trail complete, finished, is that a finished trail? It's all done?
No, that's what the red lines
Yep.
are, the to-do lines.
Yeah.
Coming onto the ski trail?
So,
Yes.
and the reason that it does that is as the trail builders were building, they noticed some liquid spraying out of things, and they said, what's going on? And somebody had said, don't worry about it. And then somebody from the town came over and said, worry about it. So they routed it towards the trail, and it is the intention, although not ideal, would be to go onto the trail to avoid spray field area and then get back up into the woods where they can get back up into the woods and not be in that area. So anything that would be done on a ski trail would be minimally invasive to not impact the winter usage. So it's not going to be it will be done in a safe way, in a nice way, but it's not going to be it's not going to stand out, I guess. It'll be very, very utilitarian to get up and maintain a less than 5% grade so that somebody that's more of a beginner would be able to ride their bike up without getting out of breath, so, and that's, again, it's not exact, but that's a very good representation. And I was on the phone with that specific trail builder this morning confirming that makes sense in his mind as a representation of what would actually happen. So, because it is flagged too. Once the snow melts, you'd probably be able to see it. If it still exists, I don't know what happened with the construction. So,
One thing we probably want to keep in mind too is we have new snowmaking was just installed last fall up there on that trail, so.
right.
That was part of the other reason they did go on to the ski trail.
Yep.
Was because they were there at the same time.
Yep.
Yeah, he said that he did not want to build it to have it dug up because it wouldn't make sense. So,
Linda, I would love to see on this map, somehow, maybe we can as a town, put an overlay and show where the spray fields are.
yep.
We actually have that
Mapped it?
in Google Earth.
Yeah, if you-
can see the spray fields.
And that's an overlay we could put together. It just, when I watched the YouTube recordings of these meetings, it was very hard to see those on the printouts of the actual Google Earth. Yeah, and from what we understand, the spray fields would be to the left of looking at the mountain, and the stuff that's on the right is decommissioned.
Abenaki parcel and what is the Springfield parcel.
Yep.
They're two different parcels.
Yeah, we should have an overlay so we know where the boundaries are for and where the actual spray fields are that we're still using and will be for the next 5 years. Because we had a conversation today, and there is a concern that the water coming out of the spray fields is not necessarily the cleanest water on the planet.
Well, right, yeah.
So they don't know what long-term exposure would be for people who are up in the area and using all those things on the spray field.
Right, right. And I think, probably everybody in this room or anybody riding a bike doesn't want to have to worry about long-term exposure to that. So however we could build the trails to avoid that, I'm sure everybody would be on board with. I mean, the people building the trails, they literally said, I don't want to be near that. So they tried to route around that. So.
And even to that point, Brian, today, before there was any biking going on, if you just wanted to go for a walk there and you chose to walk up Holy Chute from the pond to the summit, you would encounter such things. That's there today. It's very wet.
Yeah.
The trail, I've timed to myself so that the sprayer is over there while I go by. So, I mean, it's already like that on the Holy Chute trail.
Yeah.
So on the double track trail. It's not just, the single track trails don't go anywhere near it until the climb line came. The rest of this.
Yeah.
Constructed?
So the blue dots is what has been constructed. The red is what would be finished. And I think there's two caveats to that, and that's why there's a broad range in pricing. Obviously we need town approval before we finish anything. And, provided we are able to continue and finish, there's, budget for phase one and expectations that were set by previous people as far as trail building costs, and then now what we know as true trail building costs after having spoken with lots of people. So I think there's going to be, if we're looking at 2022 and a certain amount of money, if we wanted to finish the flow trail to a certain point and where you see it crosses two different ski trails that are basically wide open trails in the summer, we could end at an intersection of the trail and let people go down the trail. So there's a potential for lesser or more cost depending on how long that actually is. And I think that the money there would also be tied to the other proposed trails, so that if we had a certain amount of money and we wanted to maximize that, could we get the other stuff in and finish this a little bit shorter? Or, so I think that's a conversation that we would have with kind of the board, and obviously with the town, and then the donors that would be willing to be part of the trail construction from the finance side. So
Rudy, I have a question. Holy Chute and Grandview, were they originally cross-country ski trails?
They still are, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, and so again, that's a conversation we had today. The spray fields are never used in the winter. They can only be used in the summer months.
Right.
So that's probably why there wasn't much of a concern when they built them as cross-country ski trails, but purposing them as bicycles, or walking trails, that's when you got to watch out that you don't get sprayed with effluent.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's some more details on each of these trails, so I don't know if you want it, we could probably go to the next slides. So the climb line, this is a picture of the climb line. It's a two-way trail. It's a 5% grade or less. So again, if we're talking about speed of people going up or down, it's not extremely steep. If you've walked it, you can walk up it. It doesn't get you winded. It's constructed in a way for that specific purpose, right? There are some things that you can see, like that rock. So for an advanced person that wants to spice up the climb a little bit, they can go over the rock, but everybody else can clearly go around it without an issue. It was done in such a way that the trail is very smooth. It's machine built. So like we mentioned earlier, as far as cutting routes and doing things to keep things out of the way, it's very easy to ride for people, even on 3-year-olds on a balance bike could do this. This is meant.
Trouble with washouts, if we get a heavy rain coming down a path like that, they tell you not to go down into the lake because you'll a lot of runoff.
Yeah,
That problem?
all of these are in the master plan, and I did put one slide in here that shows trail construction kind of schematics and things like that. They're done in such a way where there's going to be a certain amount of area, and then you kind of pitch it so things can run off. And if there's any area that could retain water, then you would, not on this specifically, because this isn't as large as the other trail, but you would put in culverts to kind of divert drainage where the grade would be sloped and it would pool into a culvert so it could go underneath the trail and out the other side. So again, to minimize that erosion and things like that, where would incur more maintenance if it was constructed in such a way that was not forward-thinking to thinking about weather and use.
Linda,
So-
you and I walked that. Remember? I thought it was fairly steep. In certain areas.
You probably walked up to the area where it kind of stops.
Yeah.
And one section it stops because it's wet. And then it kind of carries on about another 50, 75 feet above it. And that kind of only goes another short ways and then it stops because it hits.
Yeah, and so, some of that, yeah, and that's even the trail builder was saying that wouldn't, because Rudy flagged it recently, and he's like, oh yeah, that's that trail that exists, it just goes straight up. We don't want to do that. We want to, that's why it kind of shows going into the ski trail to make it so you don't have that kind of extreme angle. You know, and again, I tried to be very specific about these, like trail width, the type of trails optimized for climbing and rolling switchbacks, just kind of clearly stating the kind of generic features of these types of trails. Any questions else on the climb line? Okay, the highway in the woods, as I've heard it called on these other videos. So the flow trail, it would be a one-way trail, and I think that one of the reasons for that is the fact that you would have more speed on this, and I think keeping uphill traffic off of it just makes sense. You don't want to be coming down and hitting a jump and getting bummed out because you have to swerve around somebody. I think the one thing I want to make sure everybody knows with this trail, and having talked to the trail builders at length about this, it is built in such a way that actually the wider trail like this requires less maintenance. As counterintuitive as that sounds, but you know, this is something that could be maintained with people that know how to do it with rakes, and as long as you're staying on it and doing some volunteer days periodic, like once or twice, you know, in the spring and the fall. And it's done with, as you can see, the mats on the left-hand side to regrow some of the stuff to retain the dirt. There are culverts in this, so that water, as you could imagine with that picture right there, it would run down on the left-hand side where the slope angles in. There would be a culvert at the bottom of that to redirect the water underneath the trail so it won't wash it out. So all of this is being done with the latest construction techniques, and this specific crew has been building bike trails for 20 years. One of the areas in which they build is Bentonville, Arkansas, which is one of the hubs for mountain biking because the Walton Family Foundation is trying to attract lots of talent to work for Walmart in Bentonville, Arkansas. So they're building out an amazing network of trails to bring people to that town to work ultimately. So yes, they are from out of town, but they're incredible builders. We were happy to have them here, and I think the quality of the trail is worth bringing in people of that caliber. And I know you mentioned something about Highland and other trail builders, and we did have people from Highland come over and weigh in on construction, and should we buy our own equipment and build our own team or hire other people, or what's going on. And so we have had all those conversations in perspective of, who are the right builders to come in? Why should you bring people in? What types of trails should be constructed? So again, a lot more than just shown on this slide specifically, but, we have done due diligence on that type of thing as well.
How do you avoid careless? Meaning, how do you keep people from going up when they're not supposed to? How do you keep people from riding on the trails in the spring and in the fall when they're not supposed to?
Yeah, I think signage, is one, and I know that there was a conversation about the people being frustrated with Sewellwood saying, oh, we can't ride our bikes over there. That's, being clear, right? Please stay off the single track trails, or with the uphill, I think one great thing is it's steeper, so people are probably going to be like, this is terrible, I don't want to ride up this. So I think there's a little bit of physical deterrent, which is good, but I think also clear signage at the bottom of wherever that trail ends saying uphill trail only. And again, it ties into that bigger picture of signage, clearly identify where you are, what is this trail supposed to be for. And I think the last bullet point on there, the fact that all features are rollable and have no gaps in the jumps. This is something that, provided you're on a bike and going down a hill, you can go over everything and you don't have to worry about your tire size or your skill set. Like, can I clear this jump? Am I going to case it? This is all rideable by all ages. So. No worries. I'm good to move on if everybody else is.
I do know a physical therapist at Huggins, and she has said that 95% of all bike accidents that come to Huggins, mountain bikes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, one of my best friends broke his collarbone before his wedding because we were at Highland. It happens. So the proposed trails for this year, in addition to, if we're able to finish the other stuff, would be over on kind of from the top going towards Filter Bed. So there are existing trails in here, and there's further slides that show the difference between each one of these, just because that looks a little bit busy. So, but I wanted to just kind of give you, as far as pricing on these ones, right? I mean, these are, as you can tell by the price, some are a little bit more, some are a little bit less. And as you can see in the last bullet point there, trail signage, kiosks, and there's certain, we were dedicating money to make sure we have clearly identified where these trails are, who they're meant for, and where you are on them. Because I think, again, one of the other questions that was brought up was, what happens if you get hurt? Does the fire and rescue know where to go? Things like that. So that was something that, provided we move forward, we would be talking with them to identify exit points or places to be able to get to different people. And again, signage would help for identifying where are you.
Again, I'd like to see boundary lines between the lots, Linda, so that you can see,
Yep.
what's on Abernathy property, what's on Sprayfield property.
Yep.
Yeah, none of this is on anywhere near Springfield. There's no Springfields on that side.
Yeah. That's it.
That's when we say Sprayfield.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
we
but
know
there's-
that we used to use them all, but once it went down to Maryland and shut for a while, and we know where they are. But this is all the Sprayfield parcel. So we may not be spraying on it, but it's that parcel that we're talking about.
Okay.
What kind of maps are those parcels identified?
We are trying, Jim's going to get us that. We were having some conversations on that. We need to get that map.
Okay.
Figure out how we got all the parts of that. My understanding, but it's
100 acres.
100 for
For
spray.
spray.
So we need to still look at that.
Yeah, because I don't know if you can see that on the online tax maps or not. So, but yeah, I mean, if there's things that we wanted for this purpose or the master plan purpose, obviously we're happy to do that and incorporate those with whatever maps there need to be. If you go to the next slide, so I broke each one of these out individually, just so it's easier to understand, only seeing one orange line against the other lines. So the Tomahawk redo, this is basically using existing corridor that the trail currently uses, and this is stuff that exists as bike trails today. So Tomahawk and Black Eye are there. They have been for years. But as you can see on the bottom right-hand side, towards the hub and that top part where the green climb line comes in, it diverts down to the left, and that would be to make room for that other downhill run, Yum Run, which is on the next slide, that shows. So we kind of, this is all flagged, and we would want to use that same area and maximize the grade. So some of this would be shifted to keep that 5 to 7% grade to be able to climb.
When those trails were built and you put them in,
I did.
you put them in.
Yes. talking with myself and others, talking through working with Parks and Rec. We were in,
In
conjunction.
in what time?
In the last 3 years.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and those trails now are very, I'd say more like Sewell Woods type of construction.
Yeah, the bottom half, the black eye piece, is a much better trail than the upper Tomahawk. That's why it's kind of like the Tomahawk redo, because it's okay. I know, we all know it could be a lot better than.
Were there any trails there before? Are they old cross-country ski trails? Are they old snowshoe trails? Or were they just, this is
No.
the way, this is the
There's
easiest
nothing.
place to blaze a
Just woods.
trail?
And then if you go to the next slide, it'll show the Yum Run. So this one, as you can see, kind of similar path, but it's going, it crisscrosses the Tomahawk Redo Trail. And again, all of these names, not necessarily what they're going to be called. And even as you could tell back with Fernald, it's actually the Willowbrook Conservation Area, but this is just what everybody's called them for a while. So the Yum Run is more of a downhill trail, again, one-way trail. It would be what's called more like an enduro trail, so it's not going to be that same width as the flow trail that is being built, so it's not as large, not as...
It'll be a little more like the climb trail as far as weight.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if you think about trail width, it'd be more like that climb trail. So, but the one thing that would be in here is, there would be some variability in riding surface. So some small jumps, some roots, some rocks, things like that. So it's not going to be completely buffed and smooth. And I think that that's number one, just to work with what's there in the woods, but also to give some, varying types of riding. And if you go to the next slide, this is actually in addition to the Yum Run. So this is, if you see the word flyover or enhanced trail feature, like there's a couple areas where the trail would cross. And this is the type of feature that would be, proposed to be constructed. As you can see, very substantial, done with the latest building code practices. This picture is actually from the people that built the trail, the flow trail. This is another one that they've built. So, because when I asked them for examples of flyovers so that we could have understanding to show in this presentation, you'd have an understanding of what it is. So, wide, very smooth, so there's no bump and handlebars, big lumber, so it's not going to be wobbling if you ride over it. So, very well constructed. And I think there's 2 or 3 areas where if the trails converge, they would, we would anticipate having some sort of construction like that. Yeah, I mean, yeah, and that's the, as I've done a lot of digging over the past month, as far as the trail builders and their insurance and how they're building and what spec and all of this, all of these things from the, the words of the people that are building them, this is the latest techniques. This is the most safe techniques. We're doing things with actually, against building codes. And again, that's why I wanted to visualize this type of thing. So before anybody walks out in the woods and goes, oh, wait, what's this thing now? We would have a clear representation of the type of construction. So if there was going to be an enhanced feature, it'd be very, very robust, meant to last, with proper handrails and things, so nobody's going to fall off the side if they're 3 years old riding in a balance bike. Because I think that's the thing. Like through all of this, I like to bring my children out there. So when building these trails, my son's first balance bike had no brakes, and I would take him into Fernald, and it was a little nutty sometimes watching him drag his feet flying over the rocks. And so now my daughter, they make balance bikes with brakes, so she has it. But I would anticipate bringing them to these things, and I want to feel safe when they're out there riding. And I think that's really the gist of this, is that if we're going to do it, let's do it the right way. Yeah, it might be expensive, but if we got the right people together and we can do it, it'd be awesome. So,
Can Linda and Jim and Rudy, can you give me a little history lesson? When the cross-country ski trails were put in, how did that happen? Did Steve Flagg come to the town, to the selectmen? Did he come with a plan? I'm just wondering what that history is compared to what's happening now, and if we can learn from the past going forward.
Yeah, it wasn't, I mean, I went out and did a lot of the work with Steve Flagg on those trails over the years. Not sure what his involvement was with the town. I'm assuming he probably went to the Parks and Rec and they talked about the layout, where the trails are going to be. Some of them we constructed brand new right through the woods. Some of them were upgrades of existing trails that were already out there, like over toward the Bean property there off of the base of Abenaki. So
When were the cross-country ski trails built? Anybody know?
I can tell you the Sewell Woods one started back in the mid-'70s.
Yeah,
I mean-
early 70s to mid-70s.
Yeah.
They were,
And Sewell Woods was first, and then Abenaki was second?
I mean, they were there when I was a kid skiing at Abenaki. So, I mean, at least 40 years.
Yeah. And the Bean family owned a lot of that property, right?
Yeah.
The document that you have there, Linda, with pathways, was on the Pathways Committee. That was designed to link Abenaki
To
to
Sewell.
Woods. There was actually a plan at one point with Dave, we talked about paving a side strip of filter bed all the way out to where almost Thayer comes into filter bed there. But it was all designed with this idea of creating a trail network throughout town that would afford people the ability to go from Abenaki over to Sewell, over to Brewster, down to Libby. That whole pathways thing that started after the master plan in 2007, you know, it was generated with the idea to make Wolfeboro more walkable, more rideable. So we're going through these iterations, you know, over and over again. But when pathways went out of existence, that's when Wolfeboro Single Track picked up the enhanced trail in a joint venture with the Cross Country Ski Association to make sure that those trails were maintained. It does get a little fuzzy, I have to say, over on Abenaki. Originally, there was some discussion about whether Parks and Rec should be responsible for that, or whether that was Pathways' purview. I don't know that that ever got completely resolved.
How long have we owned, Linda, how long have we owned the Sprayfield property?
Yeah, Dave's researching down the file to be able to pull that so we can get all the information required.
Okay. And we've owned the Abenaki Hill area forever.
Right.
When I was going to grad school, one of my professors at UNH told me that the spray area was started in the mid-'70s. So,
All right, we solved it.
hearsay, but
Yep.
that's what I was told.
Okay, yeah. I think there's a couple more slides, and I don't want to spend we've been here a while, right? So The new climb, and this one's honestly even on the fence for us, but again, we're trying to think about uphill, downhill, making sure there's enough routes that aren't going to interact with each other. I think that the cost of this one is not, as you saw on the first page, not as much as the others. So I think depending on how everything nets out, funding, this may be one that we do or we don't do. But this would be, again, more made for just getting uphill in the woods. And I think, if you're a mountain biker and you have the option of riding up through the woods on a windy trail or on double track, you'll probably choose the uphill in the woods. So just to make it a little bit more fun and enjoyable. So that's all that is just a kind of another option.
Right, one of the reasons for that trail was, when you're coming from town, if you start on Filter Bed, you have the climb from there, or you can come around Lower Bog Run, which is not a climb. But when if you were doing the loop and you were coming from, the base of the ski area and going back out towards the pond and you wanted to do a whole lap and go back up towards the top, right now the only option is to go to the right of the pond and then usually go up Holy Chute. Or if you were to jump in the woods right now and go up Tomahawk, which is a very difficult climb. So one of the nice things about that little connector, if you would, in there, it just gives people a nice option to get elevated, because there is quite a difference between the top of the pond and Filter Bed Road as far as height. It's not really shown here, but it's a pretty big up, just that section. And then from there, at the top of that, they can go around Grandview, cut back in, and then jump on to the other climb that was in the previous slides to get to the top of the mountain.
Yep.
So it just kind of helps complete, a ride.
And we're going to eventually blend in snowmobile trails and ATV trails too?
I doubt it.
I hope not.
Might as well.
Well,
No, yeah. Powered vehicles.
It works in Berlin.
If you want to pay for all of the maintenance, sure. Powered vehicles really rip up the trails. So, I think we probably go to the next slide on this one. So this here, right? I just wanted to put this in again. Further details on trail building will be outlined in the revised master plan. Just calling that out, setting my statement there. But these are the types of there are standards. There's diagrams explaining exactly how trail construction should be done, how drainage should be done, width of trails, types of trails. So I don't want to spend a ton of time on that, but that's the type of stuff you would expect when we propose a new master plan that aligns with the plans we have in town. So you can go to the next slide. I think right, the future trail maintenance. This is something where, like I said earlier, the trails at Abenaki are being built to a high level. We're doing it in such a way that we're going to try to minimize maintenance, because I think the last thing anybody wants to do is pay for something and then have to keep paying for it. So it doesn't matter who's paying for it, right? And I think the other aspect of that's really helpful in this picture here, which is a day we did in Sewell Woods. This was this summer at the end of the year. As you can see, it's fall. Where a ton of people came out. It was really cool to see. Well, how many people were there, Rudy? Like 30, 40 people?
Yeah, it was at least 30.
Yeah, and it's just people carrying buckets and wheelbarrows and snipping branches and just going out, and people from the fire department you could see there, and or maybe you can't tell because he's bending down, but just the people from the community, from young kids to older women to guys in their 40s. Is a mix of the whole community, and for different reasons they were all out there. So that was kind of neat to see. And as we have seen as the years have gone by, we have on our website a volunteer page. There's a lot of people that reach out and say, hey, I just moved to town, I'd love to help out, I love biking. Or, hey, I go on these trails all the time, let me know what's going on. So we see a lot of that year over year, and it's the donation numbers every year, the volunteer numbers every year, everything has increased exponentially, like twofold every year. So again, it's just really cool to see that when we're thinking about this, we're thinking about the community, long-term scalability of the trail networks, sustainability as far as the amount of money that it's going to take to maintain this. And I think, again, not in this, but our ideal scenario would be to drive enough people to these trails to have enough donations to fund an executive director that could be on the trails talking to people, making sure the trails are doing what they should be doing. If you think about other organizations like the NIC that have somebody that is a paid position, we're not there yet. But I think as we can see year over year, the level of interest and funding, it's getting to a point where we're talking about it. So you can go to the next slide. And I think the overarching vision, right? It's a chance, right? It's a chance to do better with the town. We got here because of some missteps with some people. Again, don't want to spend a lot of time going back on that, but I think we're here. We're ready to communicate. We want to clearly articulate what we're trying to do. I think the Wolfeboro Single Track Alliance was built to be the conduit for trail building in this town. As pathways kind of dissolved, they recognized, hey, maybe this is the right organization to kind of pass the torch to. I know that what's been shown here, and I don't have any other slides necessarily. Actually, I think I have one, but thinking about the greater picture of what could this be. I think we're in it for more than just can we finish a couple trails at Abenaki. It's how do we tie this all together. And actually it is the next slide, because if you think about it, the high school is up on the hill just outside of town, and you can actually kind of get there. Even when I was younger, there's some trails that go back behind through that marsh area that connect over to Wittenneck Road to the rail trail. There's ways that you can get to the Sewell Woods from town. Obviously, it's right there. You can get to Abenaki via filter bed. There have been conversations about connecting Abenaki to the NIC and willingness through private landowners to make that happen. I know there's aspirations to potentially have a overpass or underpass to get from the NIC to the rail trail. That's a way bigger conversation that I don't want to get into tonight. But thinking about future things of how to safely connect all of this is really what we should be thinking about. And quite frankly, from just a personal side note, I was looking to move to Park City or Stowe, Vermont, or somewhere where there were bike trails that connected through town that had different things like this that we now have. But because my family's here and because there's no income tax and because I can work from home, here I am. So I think that there's a lot of people that, as we could see, over the past 2 years, when you're looking, if you're sitting on the shoreline at night in the summer, all the summer house lights are on. All the people are here. And then even in the winter, a lot of people have probably stayed here. So I think giving multi-season availability and the fact that the pandemic has opened up work from home. I mean, I work technically in Maryland. Never been there.
I work in California.
Yeah, and he works in California. So I mean, the fact that people can do this and can choose a location like Wolfeboro to call home, to bring in young families and all of the kind of the vitality that sometimes I think people say is an issue. I think it's a great opportunity to have this type of thing in town. And to be able to ride. And that's why my family, we go to Stowe multiple times a year, because you can ride the bike trail, go get dinner, go throw some rocks in a river, go, do all this stuff, and you're on a bike the whole time. And by the way, when you're there, sometimes I see my friends who live in Beverly or down in Massachusetts that used to live in Wolfeboro, and it's like, hey, what are you doing here? It's because people gravitate to the areas that have this type of facilities. So I think there's maybe one or two more slides, and then we can kind of call it a night, right? I think just to call out, right? There's the New England Youth Cycling Organization reached out. They want to do a race. They're like, hey, we know you guys are doing stuff up here. Would you guys be open to it? The summer race series, which happened at Abenaki last year, they loved it. They would want to come do it again. And I checked to make sure that was done through proper town approval, and it was before I put the slide in here.
Check that off.
Yeah. So, but they want to come back in July. They'd love to do it. And if we have new trails, we'd love to kind of route the new race series through the new trails and bring more awareness to the town. And
so when are you going to start the youth cycling group?
I have way too much on my plate. Somebody else can grab that. But
if you're building it for the kids, I want to see a kids group.
Oh yeah, no, I mean that's the thing. There is definitely the willingness. I will just say from what I got going on, that's not going to be me. So maybe Luke wants to do it, but I think that's, again, it's an opportunity, and these are people, like I mentioned earlier, the young girl that was coming in from Massachusetts and, just loved it and wanted to be part of what was going on. And if we can draw more people to these areas, and if we go to the next slide, it's I know that you asked about this in the last meeting, right? Like, what happens to these towns? What are people doing? Are our bike trails going to change the face of Wolfeboro and make millions of dollars for everybody in town? Not necessarily. Is there a potential for it to add to the, to what's happening in this town? Absolutely. Burke it's up in Vermont, 2 hours from here. I drive up there sometimes to ride bikes. I know Rudy goes up there. I know Brad Beveridge goes up there. I know Andrew Ingham goes up there. I know a lot of people that ride, pack their bikes up, go up for a long weekend, spend a couple $100 a day between dinners, trail passes, whatever, and then come home. And I think the cool number here that I was able to find from Kingdom Trails is, 5,000 kids under 15 rode those trails last year. So just like that sort of, and those are gnarly trails too. Like those are way more intense than what we got going on here. To the fact that like you got to have some legs on you to climb up some of those trails. But people are going there. They're enjoying it. They love it. Burke is a huge draw now for the mountain bike community. And there's people, and I think the relative location with Highland is also similar. You got people that have come there that know maybe they could hit Wolfeboro. That you start trying to think of these long weekends that you can kind of put some stuff together. In Kingdom Trails, what is it like? Well, I mean, it's the other aspect of this is, we do not want to charge. We're doing this as a nonprofit. I mean, for two reasons. One, liability. Two, we'd like for anybody to be able to ride these. We want it to be able to, somebody that comes to town that has a bike, they go out, they ride. You don't have to go buy a pass. You don't have to spend money. I think it's a very noble thing. It's great. I mean, I'm sure everybody wants to make money off of every business, but at the same point, this area has a lot of great stuff. You got the parks like, McKinney Point down at the end where people can go swimming and. Yeah, I want to say it's, what is it, like $35 or something like that. I mean, it's not crazy, but it's not cheap. Yeah, Highland's got a lift. I think, I want to say Burke is maybe between 20 and 40, something like that. I mean, we
I think
could.
the family passes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
and we
that's-
charge for Abenaki.
Yeah.
It's not like you price tag.
Right. Well, and we do
Look at that.
we do fundraising things, and we've done lots of pushes. Like I said, year over year, it's doubled every single year the amount of money that we've brought in. To the first year, it's like great. We paid for the website. We did, we like did a bunch of stuff where it just kind of it's worth what it's doing. Now it's thousands of dollars coming in, and to some of the other stuff, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I think there is, once it's there and there's more people riding it, there's people that'll donate $200, $500 stuff. You're like, wow, oh, awesome! Like from Massachusetts, that they just, when they come up to town, they're excited that there's trails there. So I think at this stage, we've been able to sustain building and maintaining what we have. Keep all of the the website running, all the things that we need to do, be able to buy equipment, buy the snow dog, all that sort of stuff. It's been sustainable. I think again, part of the reason we're here is that we got a very rapid trail process that happened with some funding all of a sudden. So, I mean, it's a good problem to have to some degree, is that somebody wanted to spend a bunch of money, but, or multiple people. And I just think, again, forward thinking, this is the conversations that we have as the board, right? How do we want to do this? And I think as a founding member of the Single Track Alliance, I personally want to limit liability to myself. I don't want to get sued because somebody gets hurt. And the way to limit that is not charge for trail building, and so it's legally, and that's where Brad would come in, the lawyer on the board, to weigh in. So
How much do you guys have in the bank?
I don't know if that's relevant to this conversation, so I'm not going to share it.
Okay.
Do you think the estimate I think the estimate was thrown out there of $30,000 to $40,000 potentially maintain the Abenaki trails. Do you think that number was high?
I would say it could be a little high. I mean, I think if we look at things through volunteer, there's ways to offset that. When like I said, I talked to the trail builder about maintenance. He said, when I'm up there, if I get up there, right, to finish these trails, we can do some sessions on trail maintenance and get people out there, like how to make sure these things stay intact. And I think if we're smart about that, we have money to buy rakes, we have money to buy backpack leaf blowers. There's things that we can do as the Wolfeboro Single Track Alliance to minimize the impact of long-term maintenance. And I think, as with anything in life, if you keep up with it and don't wait until it's a huge mess, it's easier to maintain than if you let it go for 5 years and go, oh crap, we have to rebuild this whole thing. So I think that's where we would want to just plan and make sure that we're being smart about that maintenance. I don't necessarily think it's a 30,000. I mean, it's if we're talking about that one trail, I don't think it's $30,000 a year to maintain a single trail, or multiple trails for that matter. Because I mean, like I said, it was Sewell Woods, Fernald.
Andrew Lester said the Abenaki trails, and I don't know if he specified just the flow trail or not, but he said the Abenaki trails. And he said about $35,000 a year as a maintenance plan going forward.
I think we would want to look into any numbers that were brought up from Bellaterra, just because as I've found a lot, not everything lines up. So, I think, again, with looking at the master trail and moving forward, we can have a good conversation about that, what's kind of a reality, and make sure that everybody's cool with whatever the approach is. So.
Our conservation commission, and then you would have Selectmen. You have a larger net than what we would.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Give it to us so we can
Sure.
have a copy of it.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't.
Got it.
Is there any other slides, or is that it? I want to say that. Oh, yeah. There it is. Beyond the data,
That's what
right?
it's all about.
We want to create recreational opportunities for a wide range of community members, right? I mean, that's it. I don't know. There's a lot of opportunity to get out in the woods around here, get kids off of tablets and phones, and or get people in their 40s or 70s off of the TV or whatever. It's I think being able to connect all of this and thinking about that bigger vision, right? I mean, like Pathways has put forward, and like we've talked about, being able to just make it cohesive, it would make sense. And
if you're ever back in what's now the Back Bay Club again, down in the lower dining room, I'll call it the far side, the right side, if you turn around back, look at the bar. Anyway, there's a picture, probably 4x5, painted that says, "Come vacation in Wolfeboro." And it has pictures of everything you can do. You can hunt, you can swim, you can boat, you can ski, you can Nordic ski. The only thing it's missing is a bicycle, because it wasn't a thing back in early 70s. But it was I actually wanted to take a picture of it, because very relevant. It's a thing to bring people to the area to recreate.
I think that we're a recreation center.
And along, I think, Brian, you mentioned it, the youth cycling group, and if you think about Abenaki, the Pop Whalen Pass, you already have a beautiful lodge, you have this improvements to the ski area and the ski hill with the snowmaking. It all really rolls in together. If you had a youth group like you do for the
Cross-country
skiers.
skiing, or
The Nordic skiers, plus I'm thinking the downhill skiers, and you look at what they've done at Abenaki as far as bringing skiing and competitive skiing to Wolfeboro. There's no reason that Wolfeboro can't have a competitive cycling. I mean, it's been talked about at Brewster, it's been talked about at the high school, and it really follows through all the grade levels. You know, like the woman said before, from 3rd to 12th grade.
I couldn't get any interest when I tried. My son Brody raced from the time he was 10 years old. For 3 years, he was the New Hampshire, New England road race and time trial champion for his age group. We had our own small team, and he raced with 2 other teams out of Massachusetts. We raced from Jamestown, Rhode Island, all the way up to upper state New York. And I went to the high school, they said liability. I went to Brewster, they said we don't deal with people in town. So it was just, I hit walls trying to get it. But I tried for several years to get a youth cycling group, road racing, and because that's what he did.
But I was thinking more.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think in general, like I actually, when I used to when I used to work in Portsmouth, in the summer, I would drive from Portsmouth to Great Glen up near Mount Washington to do a bike race series every Tuesday. That's a long drive to go from Portsmouth to Mount Washington back to Wolfeboro after work. But it was because it was something fun to do. And if we could have something like that out of Abenaki, where you come, you set your time, and it wasn't like you set a personal time, and whoever had the best personal times over the course is, that's how they had chose points.
And that's funny, because every Monday night for about 6 years, Brody and I used to go from Wolfeboro down to Portsmouth to ride with the Papa Wheelies
Right.
riding group.
Right. So, I mean, and I think that's the thing. There's people that are willing to travel. There's people that would not want to travel. So if we can bring that sort of stuff here, I mean, that's, again, I like biking. I like to ski. Those are kind of my 2 big things. And that's why I've spent the time I have to work with this group to hopefully get trails in this town. So.
Next meeting, we need to deal with trails that have been built on Abenaki, but not given permission, looking at how we purchase the land, if there are any restrictions on the land, and we're going to have to hammer that out, how we handle that, what we need to let the public know, what regulations we need to follow. We've done some preliminary work on that, and then we need to decide how to take that and resolve together. So that seems to be the next step, the next meeting.
Yeah, and as far as timing goes, just for trail construction purposes, I guess how quickly, if we're going to do a public hearing, if we're going to do stuff, if we wanted to try to just get through this and come to some sort of resolution, do we know roughly a timeline or how we would want to do that? I know that obviously we're willing to do that, and I know that everybody else has jobs and responsibilities, so I know this will take some time, but I'm just trying to set expectations for, trail builders that somebody may have said at the end of last year, hey, you're going to come back to town, but I've had to call everybody and say, no, you're not coming back in the spring, so.
I think the spring would be early.
Yep.
Do you want to weigh in this?
Yeah, I think that's going to be awfully quick. There's a lot of documentation that's going to be pulled relative to those spray fields. Needs to be analyzed by the attorney to find out exactly where we stand with that. Dave is working on pulling those files right now.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess all I'll say to that is, we're obviously willing to meet whenever we need to make sure we can do this in an efficient manner, but obviously understand that there's processes that need to happen. And that's.
I, for what is a member of the board of selectmen, what we do, we've got those bike trails there. To me, at some point, we need to hold a public hearing, get public input to find out how the public.
Yep.
Brad, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's, like Jim pointed out, and you mentioned too, we definitely have to work through the legal part as to what we can and can't do on that property. Because we did take it by eminent domain, I believe, back in the day. So we need to find out if there's any restrictions on that as to what, because it was taken for the use of effluent disposal. So we need to find that out. And then, as you said, public hearings, get through that process. So it's going to take some time, but I will add that, I really appreciate the openness and the sitting down and going through all this detail to get where we've gotten and to see your overall picture. I think it's kind of a breath of fresh air. I feel better about moving forward with this now than I did, a month ago, even after this kind of all came to a head here. So I think we're in a better spot anyway, put it that way. I think we're heading in the right direction, so
Okay, great.
I do appreciate that.
Yeah.
I want to thank you too. I think it's very helpful, and we'll try to get through it the best we can.
Yeah.
But I think that the issue is going to be the land and then getting the public hearing. So we should probably meet. We've been usually meeting on Wednesday. We want to meet the 13th of April and deal with that. I'm just looking at. This is the 16th. We have a meeting on the 23rd, and then we have a meeting on the 6th and on the 20th at Selectmen. So 13th, either the 30th or the 13th. I don't think the 30th we'd be really ready. Do you, Jim?
No, I think the 13th is probably going to be the best.
Yeah.
Looking at schedule here. Yeah, I don't think, I think we can have this stuff, but I don't think we'll be prepared. Because we also have to figure out the mechanism for which
Yep.
the donation or the grants come through, and I think that's going to be as well as challenging. So I believe the 13th is the best day.
Does that work for everybody? The 13th?
Yeah.
We'll do it at 6:30. We'll do a work session. We'll hopefully have enough of our information together that we can then really deal with how we're going to move forward with those and what we need to do for those. And then also take a look at what future projects we may want to have done coming through. Whether we want to put all that out in one public hearing. There was a suggestion maybe we want to put it out as a warrant article. So we as a board still
It's not very often that the town either accept money or has a project done where hundreds of thousands of dollars are spent, where we don't get an idea what the voters say. I know that there was one for the, I was told, I was educated, that there was one to accept all the snowmaking equipment at Abenaki. But that was just to upgrade an existing system. This is a whole new piece of stuff that's being built on the town property.
Right. Okay, yeah.
We're going to have to work that out, and hopefully by the 13th, we'll come to some kind of consensus and really give you some direction, which is what I hear you saying. And maybe at that point, you can give a timetable.
Yeah,
Lay it out by then?
I would hope to be able to, for that 13th, be able to give you some direction.
Okay, yeah, no.
If
great.
that works for you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it's got to work for us, right?
We're going to now have you and our mercy.
And I mean, if we all of a sudden find something that is complete revelation that says absolutely not, we'll get in touch with you sooner than later. But so we'll work through that. Dave, like I said, is pulling those documents, getting them together, so the attorney can go through them.
Okay, great.
Before I call for adjournment, does anybody else have any comment or questions or say anything? No. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for coming. We have to get into a non-public session.
Would you like a motion to go into non-public?
Yes.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Ed?
Yes.
Yes.
Luke, are you